Hey folks, it's Nate, and it's time I got back to the drawing board, and tonight we are back with Chapter 9 of Naoki Urosawa's Monster. This is where the plot starts to get really complicated. And I'm going to do a little bit more of a recap of previous chapters just to try and keep you all on board in the event that you've resisted the urge to just binge your way through this and take in the whole story at once. And instead want to go through it chapter by chapter at the slower rate we're doing it here. So in the previous chapter, Tenma came face to face with Johann Liebner and discovered that the boy whose life he saved was now a sociopathic serial killer. And he's had to come to grips with the fact that not only did, in trying to be a better doctor, he turn loose a really horrible person on the world, he inspired that person to kill several people on his behalf. Whether he intended for that to happen or not, it's left him very guilty. And with that in mind, we go forward into something that initially seems totally unrelated. Chapter 9 is entitled Young Woman of Heidelberg, and it introduces us to Nina Fortnier, who is, at first brush, seemingly unrelated. And the truth is, she's not unrelated. Of course, we wouldn't be following her if it wasn't important. But for the most part, this chapter just serves to introduce us to the character of Nina. And she's a pleasant, fresh-faced young girl. She has boys who want to ask her out. She has an academic career where she's studying to be a prosecutor. She studies Aikido, which is an interesting choice. Naoki Urosawa has done a number of manga on the subject of where martial arts are either a primary subject or a secondary subject, and he always seems to pick a different one. His biggest martial arts focused title was Yawara, which was about a judo practitioner, but by and large, it's something like judo or aikido. I'm not sure why he went with aikido in this one. Because Aikido is, while it's a very interesting and challenging technical martial art, it's not a very practical martial art, which is kind of what you would expect. But given that this is a thriller and there is going to be some physical combat in it, I'm not sure why he made this particular decision. But, I mean, it is what it is. Anyways, so she's studying to be a public prosecutor. She does her studying. She's a decent martial artist. All kinds of interesting things we learn about her. We also learn that she doesn't have any memories. And this is our first clue to who Nina is, because she has to be shown pictures in a photo album to remember things about when she was very young. And of course, who have we seen who lost her memories? Well, Anna Liebner, Johann's twin sister, also lost her memories as a result of the double homicide and attempted murder of her brother. And that's our first clue who we're dealing with here. And as soon as we get that clue, we're also introduced to the new point of conflict, because she's gotten an email, this being in the early days of email. It's kind of surprising to see how old that computer looks these days. It's still got a diskette drive in it. Ain't that great. I'm not even sure what that is. Maybe for those old 100 megabyte zip cartridges. I don't know if anybody out there remembers those. I had one of those when I was in college. So that's, of course, this is 95, 96. So I don't know if those were even around in the late 90s. Yeah, I think they were. So that's probably what it was. Anyways, it's not actually important because it's not a part of the plot or anything. Anyway, she gets an email. No person from her subject line. It just says, "I shall send you the most beautiful flowers. I was born to smother you with flowers." And that's more than a little bit creepy. Of course, Nina doesn't know who it's from. She thinks it's from one of the boys that's flirting with her at school, which is a natural thing to assume. And she goes and she sees a psychologist. We get some more hints, and that's really all this bit of the psychologist serves to do, is continue to hint that she is Anna, which is, true. But the Of course, the most obvious tell is when she's back here in class and the professor asks a question about the brutal murder of a family of 4, which causes her to feel very queasy because she was in a brutal murder that involved a family of 4, and naturally this is bringing a few things up. So we establish here that while Nina seems to have a lot of things going for her, she's smart, she's pretty, she's well liked, she has a lot of physical skills. She also has a big mental hang-up, undoubtedly stemming from the murder that left her amnesiac, and of course she's related to an obsessive serial killer, which is probably going to come back to haunt her. This is probably the first 3/4 of the chapter, and only at the end do we come back to Tenma, and we see that since his encounter with Johan and his reporting Johan's roles in the murders to the police, he's been investigating on his own. He's been interviewing people who Johan stayed with as a child, which is, of course, these families that he later had murdered, and he's starting to put the pieces together. He's starting to remember all the little details that have probably largely faded from his mind over the last 9 years. And he's starting to, try and piece together who Johan is, and he doesn't really know what he's going to do once he figures all that out. But he clearly is weighed down by the sense of responsibility, because at the core, that's who Tenma is. He is the man who is responsible for Johan. Whether you consider that just or not, culturally, in his mindset, that is who he is. And so he has to find Johan. He has to do something, maybe convince him to give himself up to the police, maybe bringing him in himself, maybe by force, maybe by persuasion. We'll see. And ultimately, he has to do something. And the only thing he can think of to do is to go out and talk to people who knew these murdered couples. And that's when he remembers that Johan had a sister. And of course, that brings us back to Nina. And Nina has another anonymous email, which is not, as she now knows from asking around at school, from any of her admirers there. And all it says is, "I will come for you soon." Because while Nina seems perfect, and she certainly has a lot of good qualities, positive qualities going for her, the reality is, once you've encountered a monster, you can never really escape. I'll see you in Chapter 10.